Welcome everybody on behalf of the Cleveland State Alumni Association. We are delighted to have you all with us today for Coffee Talk and to welcome our very knowledgeable Coffee Talk guest, Lauren Rudman. My name is Elizabeth Yauk, and I am a member of the Alumni and Advancement Marketing team, and also have my counterpart, Jordan.
Hi everyone, I'm also on the advancement marketing team.
So we are so glad to have you all with us today, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about our wonderful guest this morning. We are very excited because we love bringing alumni in to teach other alumni, and Lauren has her master's in labor relations and human resources from CSU, and she's also on our alumni board. So she has a lot of knowledge to bring to you today. She's currently the Director of Human Resources at Donley's Inc., which is a national leader in the construction industry. And she comes to us with 15 years of experience in HR and has worked in several sectors. So she will have advice for a wide range of people coming from construction, manufacturing, distribution, government, nonprofit, hospitality, education, and I'm sure more. We are very excited to welcome her, and she's going to have a lot of good tips for us. It's a crazy time, and I'm sure everybody would like to get their resume in the best shape they possibly can. We are going to have a presentation from Lauren, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. We are going to use the Q&A format in this webinar. So if you think of questions while she's presenting, you're welcome to send them over, or you can wait. The Q&A button is probably at the bottom of your screen, and it says Q&A. It looks like two little word bubbles. So if you can go ahead and send those that way, we would be happy to read your questions to Lauren, and she will answer them live. So with that, I will turn it over to her.
Thank you. Appreciate the warm introduction, and love talking to fellow Vikings and Viking alumni this morning. So as mentioned, I'm Lauren Rudman. I'm an HR professional. I've been with Donley's now for about 2.5 years, and prior to that, about 15 years of HR experience. So I'm going to share my screen. I do have a quick PowerPoint that I thought would help guide the conversation. Would you mind giving me access so I can share it? It's saying that I don't have.
Sorry about that. Let me get
That's okay. No worries.
Okay. Let me see if this makes it. Does that work?
There we go. Perfect. All righty. I'm going to share. So hopefully you can see my screen. Do you see it?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. Thumbs up?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to move down there just so I can see a little bit more. There we go. All right. So what are we going to focus on today? Resume, LinkedIn, and interviewing. Oh my. So let's chat about navigating job change during COVID-19. So you guys already heard a little bit about me, but my focus has obviously been HR for the last 15 years, and recruiting or talent acquisition, talent management, employee relations, a full HR generalist. Over the last 15 years, I've spent time in the government sector at the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority. For 6 years, I was also in manufacturing for about 6 years with a company called Erico, which was then later acquired by a company called Pentair. And then now I've been with Donley's Construction for a little over 2 years. I am active on boards around town. So as mentioned, I'm a member of the Alumni Association board. I'm also involved with an organization called Engage Cleveland, which is a regional nonprofit that's dedicated to the attraction, retention, and engagement of young professionals within Cleveland. I'm also the fundraising chair for an organization called Seroptimist International, and that organization is focused on women and girls by providing programming and scholarship awards for that demographic. And I also spent about 8-9 years on the Cleveland Society for Human Resource Management Board. So I'm now past president. I am a past president of that organization. So that's a little bit about me. Obviously, what we talk about today, all opinions are my own. I'm not representing a company or anything like that. They're strictly Lauren Rudman's opinions based on my experience, both as somebody who has been a job seeker and also as an HR professional. So encourage you to please ask questions throughout. As mentioned, the Q&A functions at the bottom, so ask away. But we'll jump into it. So what we'll hit on today is state of the labor market. There is a glimmer of hope out there, and I hope that all of you believe that. So we'll talk a little bit about that piece too. We'll talk about resumes, LinkedIn, interviewing tips, and then obviously leave time for Q&A. So that's our agenda for this morning. All right, so let's look at the state of the labor market. So as of earlier in July, the good news is that about 4.8 million jobs were added back into the workforce. And our unemployment rates fell to 12% compared to the 16 to 18% range that had been at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, the sectors that have really risen over the last couple, I'll say, weeks to months, depending on the states that individuals are in, are either the leisure, hospitality, and retail sectors, especially as many states have reopened, restaurants or bars or shopping malls or shopping centers. So that's definitely a positive. The one piece, though, that everybody should be aware of is that the pace of job creation is predicted to not keep up as much as it has in previous years with previous downturns within the economy. So jobs are coming back, but it will take years to come back to the numbers that we are at. But there are glimmers of hope out there, and I hope that all of you firmly believe that. Companies are still hiring. So if you Google who's hiring amongst COVID-19, there's lists of companies out there that are looking to hire. And I think the other positive piece with the hiring is that many organizations are changing the way that work is performed. So if you come from a traditional company that oftentimes is go to work every day, working from home wasn't really accepted, I bet that a lot of those organizations now are rethinking how their workforce is mobilized. Many people I know now work from home, and they're scheduled to work from home at least until the fall and or even through the rest of 2020. So I think the good news is that we've proven as a society that it can be done, and that will help with workplace flexibility. It'll help with employee engagement and overall ROI on the organization and their investment in their human capital. I think the other glimmer of hope throughout this pandemic has really been that networking is still occurring. It might look different because it's virtually, but I feel like many individuals who perhaps weren't able to spend time networking or maybe just didn't feel comfortable doing it. There's things with Zoom, there's things with FaceTime. There's many more options now on how to virtually network. And I think more and more people are open to networking on the receiving end, and more people are rethinking the way that networking can be done, which is beneficial for all. I think there's also, throughout the pandemic, there's plenty of opportunities to skill up. And what I mean by skilling up is acquiring new skills or abilities or knowledge. Everything you could possibly want to know is free on the internet, whether that's Google, whether that's YouTube, whether that's participating in sessions like today, whether that's paying for other continuous professional development opportunities. Learning is virtual, and that will continue to stay. So use this opportunity to perhaps pick out a topic that you needed to learn more about. I know one of the things that I'm exploring now within my organization is more so on workforce analytics. And so taking some classes online, whether they're free or paid, on analytics. So if there's an opportunity now to skill up, take advantage of all the free resources that are available on the internet. The other glimmer of hope is volunteerism, and it's still available again amongst the pandemic that we're experiencing. And volunteerism can take place in a lot of different ways. I think oftentimes we all have to gather physically someplace to perform an activity or a service. Not necessarily always the case. There are things that, there are certain activities that can be done from home, whether that's serving on a board, whether that's, could be if you're a dog walker or animal lover, walking dogs. It can be writing thank you letters for an organization. It could be helping them with a specific skill like marketing or reviewing finances or helping to recruit positions. So if you're somebody who's an active volunteer, I bet that volunteerism hasn't stopped. But maybe this is also an opportunity for you to get involved in an organization that's near and dear to your heart, or a cause that's near and dear to your heart to give back to. So again, amongst the pandemic that we have going on, I still firmly believe that there are glimmers of hope out there, and we can all take advantage of them. All right, so let's move over to the job prep work that we're going to talk about today. So as I mentioned, we're going to focus today on resume, LinkedIn, and interviewing. And again, continue to ask questions in any of the Q&A sections. I'll pause after each section, and CSU staff, please yell out if there's a question that comes up. I'm happy to answer it. All right, the resume. So many of you are probably familiar with what a resume is. You probably had to create one back in college, and probably Career Services helped you with that resume, either through providing a template or just helping review it. So a resume, I like to use the term, they're the cupcake. So I'm a huge sweets person. I love cupcakes. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. When I think about a cupcake, I think of resume as the actual cupcake, and I think about LinkedIn as the icing. So we'll talk more about the icing in a minute. But with a resume, I think a couple things always to consider that are must-be's or must-haves on your resume. Number one, contact information: name, email, cell phone number. Address is fine if you want to keep something like that on there. If you don't want to, that's okay. I think email and phone number are the most crucial parts at this point. Your resume also should be an overview of your ability and competencies. So I know that some organizations like to see objectives. And what objective are you seeking? You know, I'm seeking a supply chain manager role, or I'm seeking a marketing specialist role. But what I've noticed the trend to be more so is an overview of your ability or competencies. So using somebody like myself, who's an HR professional, listing out competencies such as experience with talent acquisition, talent management, employee benefits, compensation, employee relations, and listing things like that out at the top of your resume, because that can give HR professionals like myself who review resumes, or hiring managers, a good starting point to see what is this person's overall knowledge and abilities look like. So even as soon as they look at your name, they look at competencies and abilities, and then they can move on to work experience. And so I think the competencies and abilities piece really set the stage for your work experience. With working experience, I think a couple things to think about. One, actions and results are the most critical piece. Thinking about what action did you perform within that job and what were the results. We're really looking for highlights around this section. I'm not looking for somebody to cut and paste their job description in every single duty and responsibility. That's, frankly, it's not necessary, and it's a waste of time, and it's a waste of time for me to read every single thing that you do. Giving the highlights, showing what your involvement was, and demonstrating the results are the most important pieces within your work experience when you list it out. Another piece I think that's important to showcase when talking about work experience is the organization, but also maybe a quick blurb on what the organization does, such as their mission statement. So thinking about, with Donley's, for example, we're a full service construction company with offices in 4 states. listing something like that out because perhaps people had never heard of Donley's before. So making sure that you're listing out maybe a quick mission statement on what that organization does would be really helpful. Next is educational background. So listing out, colleges, universities, degrees earned, certifications is always helpful too if you're somebody who has to maintain CLEs on an annual basis or throughout a period of time. I think that's always very helpful. I know many of those exist. I know CSU actually has classes around certain certifications. So if you're interested in exploring one, take advantage of that, but listing out educational experience as well. And oftentimes, and just the way our society is, you can find a common bond sometimes with individuals if you attend the same school. So, we're all CSU alumni, or hopefully majority of us on this call today. So that bonds us together. And so I think that's something that's always helpful to take a look at and make sure is listed on resumes. Next is civic engagement. So volunteerism, as we talked about before, it's still there, it's still happening. And I think it's important for people to show their civic involvement on their resume. I think number one, it shows that you're passionate about a cause or a cause that you support that's near and dear to your heart. Two, I think that whatever skills and knowledge and abilities that you learn through your civic involvement can directly translate or transfer into the workforce and through your position. I know for me, for example, math was not always my strong suit. So with some of the organizations that I've served on the boards for, volunteered for in the past, I always asked to be on the finance committee because it helped me learn P&L statements, balance sheets, understanding if any kind of bonds or loans needed to be taken out. I developed a better understanding of how those worked, which then in turn helped me to better, to really recognize financial statements within my own organizations at that point. So that was very helpful. So look for those transferable skills and know that they really do make a difference within the workplace. Even though the organization and industry might be completely different, you're still learning. Next, technology. I think technology is important, especially with functions like information technology, programming, or maybe the job posting has asked for a specific technology that you have experience in. There's a section to list it so they know that you're a subject matter expert in that software platform. So that's the content of really what a resume should look like. Font and spacing is always important. When you're looking at an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, use as much white space as you can. 1 to 2 pages is typically enough. I think if you're somebody who's had a lot of different experiences, sometimes 3 pages, but keep in mind that typically resumes take 1 to 2, usually 1 to 2 pages tops. I think another important thing to understand with resumes, and this is very real now with technology, is oftentimes resumes can be uploaded, or if you upload it and then the system will then decipher out certain pieces and put them into different categories within their applicant tracking system. So make sure you take the time to review how a spacing is looked, are words spelled correctly, are certain information pieces in the right section. So that's another piece to understand, especially with applicant tracking systems these days. Keep the font easy to read, easy on the eyes, spacing, because you want it to look like an organized document because it's a reflection of you. Your resume is a reflection of your brand. So those are a couple of the pieces that to me are important to the resume piece. I think a couple questions popped up, so I'll pause there. CSU team, want to fire out some questions?
We have a few questions. First one is, when your work experience gives your age away, should we leave off old work history or the date we graduated college?
It's a good question. I think that's for better or for worse. I think if you're not comfortable demonstrating that, then I'd leave it off. I think with then work experience years, I think, what I do, for example, on my resume is I have work experience from, at this point now 15 years ago. I list it, but I don't put many, I list the titles of the positions that I had, and that was it. I don't put any details around it. And I also put through any kind of applicant tracking system, if you're seeking further information, please contact me. So I think it's okay to leave it off. You might want to have a master resume that includes all of your information, but then you have specific resumes for the specific jobs that you're applying for. And it's okay to keep those off.
We have another question. How important are cover letters, and what content should a cover letter include?
Good question. I think there's a big debate in the HR space around cover letters, and here's why. Some companies love them because it gives the applicant an opportunity to provide a narrative around their background. Other recruiters will say, I don't have time for cover letters. I just want to read about your experience and your resume. I think that cover letters are handy to have, especially if you're somebody who's an entry-level talent. So maybe you're right out of college, just graduated with minimal work experience. A cover letter can be important. In terms of contents of a cover letter, I'm a fan of 3 quick paragraphs. What's the position that you're interested in and why? What's your work experience that you can highlight thus far? And 3rd paragraph is your contact information and how to get a hold of you. And you look forward to hearing from them. So I think a quick 1-page cover letter will do the trick.
Okay. If a position only requires a high school diploma, should I exclude my bachelor's degree to avoid being stung with the overqualification?
That's a good question. I would say still list your bachelor's degree. Here's why. That organization, and let me preface this to say, you'll have to do some homework around this organization when you fill out your application online, are there other opportunities for people who do have bachelor's degrees? So they might see that, if Lauren Rudman has a high school diploma and a bachelor's degree, for example, but the position that only requires a diploma, and then they could see that I've taken the initiative to go to attend school, and it shows that perhaps I'd be a great candidate for a position in the future at that organization. So I think it's important to list it. Okay.
Thank you. So we have quite a few more.
Okay, that's okay. We got time.
How many companies should you display for your experience, including with all of your education and your civic engagement? This person says it seems really tight for a page, but you mentioned that it can be 1 to 2 pages, right?
I think, yeah, I'm a fan of 1 to 2 pages. I think, again, going back to focusing on the actions and results. I don't want you cutting and pasting your job description, duties and responsibilities. That just takes up too much space. I want you to focus on the actions and the results. So if you can go back within your career history and you can call out, 2 to 4 accomplishments that you had within each organization and or within each position, call them out. And if that means that it goes to 2 pages, it goes to 2 pages.
Okay, great. Now, here's another, with work experience, if I spent 11 years in multiple roles, left, then came back, and there is some overlap in duties, what is the best way to concisely list these? Also, if I earned a couple degrees, is it necessary, so a BSBA and an MBA, is it necessary to list the BSBA?
I would say list all of the degrees that you've had. So list all of them. Going back to the question on work, and I'm a fan of the chronological order. That's just the way I'm programmed. And that's the way that I process information. So I think if you're somebody you've had multiple roles within your organization, you list the organization, you list all the different positions that you've had and those actions and results within those positions that you've achieved. Then let's say if you left and then came back, you still demonstrate that in chronological order. If your resume is not chronologically ordered, I think putting information around the positions that you've had with the actions and results and highlights is important. And then you can list in the applicant tracking system where there's notes, happy to explain, further, when contacted for interview. It's okay to write notes like that in there, because sometimes resumes, they're very objective, and sometimes there's a lot of subjectivity around resumes. So I think it's important that you can list that as well.
Okay, great. Another one, do you recommend using a professional service?
I think professional services can be great. I think one thing to recognize is if you're asking for a professional service around a resume writing, understand that they can be expensive. So I think it's finding a firm or a person who specializes in those things. Make sure you interview them too. Understand what the deliverable is, understand what they're asking for up front, understand what the cost is, what the terms of payment are. If you don't feel comfortable spending money on it, ask a friend. And what's funny enough is I know in the past when I've had people look at my resumes or my bios just for jobs or for organizations that required one, I not only had HR professionals look at it, but I also had friends who worked in marketing look at the resumes, because I think that marketing professionals often have a great sense of how to phrase things. HR professionals, maybe it's very cut and dry. Here's the point. Sometimes marketing professionals can add a little bit of pizzazz to resume writing. So I'd encourage also to have your marketing friends look at it. And if anybody's looking for a recommendation, a friend of mine who works in marketing is happy to do them for a nominal fee.
Great. Now, is an overview of abilities and competencies typically keyword only, or are bullet points still okay?
Bullet points are good. I'm a bullet point fan. I just think it's easy to read, especially when recruiters are looking at resumes or hiring managers are looking at resumes. They're looking 30 seconds. So I think the bullet point with, a couple words in there is plenty. And I'm just a fan, again, of having it at the top, because as you scroll down within a resume, you understand the person's background right at the get-go.
Okay, great. When one is recently retired but want to seek part-time employment, is there a different work search strategy for that particular situation?
Good question. I think it's all about keywords in the resumes. With that, it's a good question. I think the one piece to be conscious of is understanding where you're applying to and what they're looking for. So your resume might look a little bit different because you've had all the work experience, assuming 30-ish years. I'm throwing out a time frame of perhaps when you worked, but I think keywords are important there. I do have my contact information at the last slide. So whoever asked this question, I'd be happy to talk in depth on that more specifically, because I think that's kind of a different animal today, but happy to help.
Okay. Next question. What if your civic engagement is politically charged?
Good question. Lauren Rudman's opinion, I think that you're presenting your full self. And so if you are affiliated with a political party, list it. And if, and what your role is within that organization. And I understand that some perhaps might disagree with me on that. I just fully believe that your resume is a reflection of your personal brand. And if you feel strongly about something that you're getting involved in it, I think it's important to showcase it.
Okay, great, thanks. Just a couple more. If I'm applying for multiple similar positions at the same company, will uploading different resumes help or hurt my chances at landing a position?
I think it helps you because you're tailoring that resume for that specific position. And I also think it's perfectly acceptable if you're going to move to a different function. So for example, if I'm in HR right now, say I wanted to work in finance. My resume is going to have a lot more numbers associated to it from my financial role that I'm applying for versus if I was applying to other jobs in HR. So again, I'm a fan of having your master resume and then making different versions based on the company and or position that you're applying to.
Great. When the company does not specify, do you recommend submitting a Word document or PDF?
I think PDFs are just cleaner. Sometimes I think that when you submit things in Word, I don't know if anybody else has ever had this problem, but sometimes I feel like letters and words get jumbled. So I think PDFs are easier to read and usually they come across cleaner because it's less chances of words being jumbled.
Okay. One more. This particular person has worked both in the government and private sector. USA jobs usually require a novella in their resume builder. What recommendations do you have for writing great resumes for the public and private sector?
It's a good question. I would say, I think it all comes down to the organization that you're applying to and tailoring it to that organization and position. I think with governments, and this is just through my experience, so your experience might be very different. The questions are a lot more yes or no questions when applying versus sometimes a resume upload. So I think make sure you're answering those questions honestly. And then with the resume, I think it's important to understand that most governments follow that chronological order piece. So making sure that your resume is following that order. I think with private companies or publicly traded companies, I think that, if you have a different type of resume, maybe it's not in chronological order, that's okay. But I feel like my experience in government, that really lends to more of an application format as well as uploading a resume in a chronological order. If you're looking for more specifics on that question, please email me so I can understand a little bit deeper.
Okay. But can you talk a little more about keywords in that screening process that a lot of companies have now before you move to the next step?
Yeah. So I think keywords are important because from applicant tracking systems, they look for action verbs and they're looking for results. So when you think about demonstrating action and what action verbs look like, for example, the words like led, the words like executed, the words managed, thinking about words that are more action oriented, performed, demonstrated. Having those action words at the beginning of that bullet point is important because those are key words that applicant tracking systems often look for. Then, depending on the position that you're looking for, so for example, if you're looking at HR positions, things like talent acquisition, talent management, employee relations, benefits, compensation, they will look for specific keywords like that within your resume. If you're a marketing professional looking at social media, SEO, clicks, content, maybe even it's old school, newsletters or social media posts. Looking for keywords like that are important for applicant tracking systems and for you to make sure are reflected in your resume. Now, so let me preface this too. Be honest in your resume. So if you really didn't lead something, choose a different word. Participated in, supported, use words like that. We want, again, resume is your personal brand, so we want it to be honest.
Okay. Color or no color?
I mean, it's a good question. I'm just a fan of no color. I don't know why. To me, it's if you have a color and you're like mailing in a resume or dropping off a resume, okay, it's not going to make me think, oh, this. I guess maybe for marketing individuals, it might be a different ballgame because they want creative resumes, especially if you're looking for more of that creative side, like graphic design or imaging or things like that versus the content side. So I guess it doesn't hurt if there's color in it, but I'm just, I guess I'm old school in the no color piece.
Okay. Now one more. Do you recommend including pending certification? So this person is working on a certain certification and it won't be complete for a couple months. So before they can take the test, how would you, if you should include it, how would you phrase that?
I would 100% include it. And I would just say, studying for XYZ, certification exam, test date, March 2021. I'm throwing out a date, but I would put that in there definitely, because you're spending time on it, you're studying, you're prepping for it. Show that, demonstrate that. It shows initiative.
If you want to relocate, how can you best include that on your resume?
I've seen it a couple of different ways. I've noticed it maybe at the top where it says open to relocation. That can be a bullet point through the competency or ability piece. I've also noticed it at the bottom of resumes where it might just be like other items to add or other items to note. And it says open to relocation, open to travel up to 50% of the time. So you can list it, I would say, in either of those areas. Sometimes too, if you're applying through an applicant tracking system, they'll ask those questions. So make sure you list what your travel capability is or relocation capability is.
Okay, that's about it for that section.
All right, great questions. Okay, so I talked about cut my sweet tooth with cupcakes. And mentioned that resumes are really the cupcake portion of it. Now let's move down to LinkedIn, which in my view is the icing. And, I think the important thing about LinkedIn is that, there's over 660 million users, which is fantastic. That platform has grown so much, over the last 15, 20 years. I think it's important to understand how you make your profile stick out. And I mentioned partnering with marketing to look at your resumes. I think also partnering with marketing to look at LinkedIn profiles is a fantastic idea. And I know that I've had, friends both in HR as well as in marketing look at my LinkedIn profile, help me with different features that I didn't even know existed before. And that has really increased the amount of views and clicks on my profile and posts that I've had. So again, I encourage you, have friends look at your LinkedIn profile, whether that's HR friends, whether that's marketing friends. I know people who do LinkedIn audits, so that might also be something to consider as well. But a couple pieces that I think are important to highlight on LinkedIn. First is photos. Majority of people I know have photos on LinkedIn. If you are going to have a photo, please make it a professional one. Please make it so I can see your face. You don't want photos where, you're on a roller coaster or you're swimming at the beach or at the pool, things like that. And yes, I have come across profiles that have those, so that's why I bring them up. But make sure that you have a professional photo there. Also too, if you notice now on LinkedIn, you can have like a backdrop photo. And, so if you're interested in having a backdrop photo, I know with mine, for example, I love the city of Cleveland, it's where I'm born and raised. So I have like a Cleveland sign in the back of mine. Just adds a little bit more pizzazz, I guess, to my LinkedIn profile. Next is headline. Headline is important, and here's why. We talked about keywords on resumes, also thinking about keywords within your LinkedIn profile. So for example, my header could be, HR director at Donley's, but I also am a lot more than that. I also am a nonprofit supporter. I also am a facilitator. I'm also somebody who's been involved in strategic planning and has led strategic planning sessions. I also am a wine cause entrepreneur. I also, on the side, my side business is I'm a cause entrepreneur with an organization called One Hope Wine. So I'm listing that also on my LinkedIn profile. So I think looking at headlines is important because of those keywords. So take a look at, and I'm happy to, if you're happy to connect with me on LinkedIn, just so you can see what my profile looks like and you can see what my headlines are. But I think that that's a great way to pick up keywords is through your headline. Your about section. I think that this is a great way to, again, demonstrate you. You are your personal brand. Who are you? and showing what various work experiences you've had, what civic groups you've been involved in, your educational background, showing off your proud Viking alumni status. Use that about section to tell LinkedIn users about you. And it doesn't have to be, you know, an entire page long, you know, maybe a paragraph or two, just explaining a little bit more on your highlights, and work, education, civic involvement's great. Moving on then to, you know, work experience with highlights. So again, what's the company? You know, list that company there with the dates of employment that are on there if you choose to. And then make sure that you're providing a little bit of context around what that role was and what were your achievements within that role. Again, we're focusing on highlights here. This is the icing on the cupcake, not the actual cupcake. So, you know, a couple key bullet points there are great. List your education, list those pending certifications, list those certifications that you have, list those in your LinkedIn profile. Again, that helps with keywords, especially if there's some organizations out there that specifically recruit from specific schools. You want to show your alumni status, or you want to show that certification that you have or that you're studying for. Engagement with highlights. Well, same thing. Easy way to network or find an affiliation with someone. List your civic engagement work. You were a volunteer, you were a board member, you served as a committee member. List those. What did you do? You know, were you part of a committee? Did you raise X amount of dollars for that organization? Did you help with event planning for a fundraiser? List those highlights in there and what the results were too, because again, those also transfer into the workplace. LinkedIn groups. LinkedIn groups can be very effective for networking. We mentioned networking virtually. That's a great way to do it. You have questions, post questions to groups, join groups that are affiliated with your professional and or personal interests. So for example, I'm part of a lot of HR groups online on LinkedIn. You know, if there's a question where I'm looking for a best practice or just to have a sounding board, joining groups and actively participating in them is really important. And this is also a great way for those of you who are early talent, so just graduating from college or maybe only have a couple years of work experience. LinkedIn groups are a great way to meet people and to get advice from people, share best practices, and really just sit and absorb the information that's in those LinkedIn groups, because I've learned a ton throughout my participation in them, and I encourage you to do the same. You can also have what's called featured content within your LinkedIn profile. And this is something, admittedly, I just discovered within the last year through my friends in marketing, where you can feature certain posts or articles or pictures or quotes, and they are one of the first things that pop up on your LinkedIn profile after your heading section and your about section. You can see featured content. So for example, a couple pieces on my featured content within my LinkedIn profile includes my company winning an award. Our company, as I work in construction, so a couple of our major construction projects that we've been involved in. So pinning those as featured content with your profile, and then adding to that as you continue to, participate in things that are large successes within your professional or personal life. Articles. So, liking articles, being an active contributor in articles or commenting on articles, that's great. It's a great way to meet people, great way to learn different perspectives from yours. Also, don't shy away from writing your own articles. And this is something, admittedly, that's been on my list to do for 2020. So maybe this is my way to start doing that. But don't be afraid to, put out a blog post or take get involved in starting to do it. I think that we all have something to offer. We all have different perspectives, regardless of our work experience. And it's important to share those. And also a great way to improve writing skills and getting your personal brand out there in the community. So that's something I would also consider doing. Recommendations. Don't be afraid to ask for recommendations from people, whether that's people that are colleagues, coworkers, previous managers, or supervisors. People do look at those. I know I pay attention to recommendations that people get, so don't be afraid to ask for them, but also take on the responsibility of recommending people who you have worked with before. So maybe again, it's a previous coworker or current coworker or a service provider. Recognize them. Those are important. Those are important pieces. And I also think we don't give enough recognition in the world today for a job well done or for a great partnership on a project or initiative. Use the recommendations as a tool to do that. And then finally, engage in LinkedIn community. As I mentioned before, getting involved in groups, responding to posts, sharing information, asking questions, learn a different perspective than perhaps you might have. Those are really important and will demonstrate, it'll demonstrate your personal brand, and it's a great way to learn. With 660 plus million users, you're bound to learn something by engaging in LinkedIn content. So that's, I'll turn it over to questions on LinkedIn if there are any.
Yes, Lauren, it looks like we do have a couple of questions for you. The first one is, they're wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on what you mean by LinkedIn audits.
Yep. So my non-scientific definition of a LinkedIn audit is somebody who reviews your LinkedIn profile. So I've had friends who I've sent my LinkedIn profile link to and said, hey, would love ideas or feedback on the content or on words I've chosen, or is it too much? Is it too little? So that's what I'm using as a LinkedIn audit. Also a great way to get your marketing friends involved and sending them links and having them do an audit of your profile as well. So hopefully that answers that question.
Great. Okay, we've got one. Can LinkedIn make or break you? Does HR still search for you on other social media like Facebook?
I think for me, I'm a LinkedIn person. I don't go and search people on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat. Frankly, I don't have time. And to me, LinkedIn is your professional brand, and that's what I search. So I think from a professional side, keep that the most up to date when job hunting or just even to have your online. LinkedIn is basically a small version of an online resume. So keep that up to date at all times.
Great. Okay, we've got a couple more coming in.
Mm-hmm.
If you have many years of experience working from home and prefer to work at home, how can you highlight that in your LinkedIn profile or on your resume?
With LinkedIn profile, I think that a good section for that might be the About Me section or the About section. Because then that kind of gives and you can mention that in your overview that you've been a work from home professional for X amount of years and you enjoy that and you hope to continue to do that. I think on your resume, as I mentioned, other points to consider, I think we had talked about earlier, willingness to relocate, willingness to travel. You could also list on there, preferred work from home. So I would say that's another point for it as well.
Great. Okay, we have a question about the groups. How does one get into a group on LinkedIn? I'd like to join a professional coaching group. Does it cost any money to join a LinkedIn group?
All the LinkedIn groups that I know of are free. And frankly, you just search for the group. You can, I think there's I don't know where the drop down is offhand, but there's, if you search groups, just, type in, professional coaching group, they should all come in and it should click join. They might ask you some questions because they want to make sure you're not a robot. So answer those questions honestly, and they should be more than welcome to invite you in, unless it's a private group where perhaps it's only for dues paying members, maybe. That's the only reason I would think it would maybe be a private group. So try searching that. If you need more help, reach out to me and I can help you with that.
Great. And then is this the best site for job searching? Would you recommend LinkedIn as a way to look for jobs?
I think so. I think that between this and all about networking, as we talked about, it's all about who you know. I think that those are the two key pieces in a job search, making sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date and making sure that you're continuing to network and make your network aware of what you're looking for in a next role.
Great. I think that's all the questions we have for right now.
Okay.
I'll turn it back over to you.
Sounds good. All right, couple interviewing tips, and I think that this is important, and especially as many of you who might be interviewing now, it might be virtual interviewing. So I'm going to tie parts and pieces of that in too. When it comes to interviewing, here's a couple things that I'd encourage you to keep in mind. First, develop an understanding of the job itself. So you have a job posting, you're probably responding to a job post or a job description that's posted. Take an in-depth look at what that means and what this job really entails. You know, is this something that you really want to do and could see yourself doing? I think that's one of the most important pieces, and that I think oftentimes some people overlook the job description. So really taking time to go through that job description or job posting that's there, and reading each bullet point and developing an understanding of what that really means. At the same time, it's also important to do your homework on that organization and the industry. So if you're applying for, you know, example to a manufacturing company, what new products have they come out with over the last couple years? What are some hot topics or trends in that industry? So making sure that you're knowledgeable about that organization or industry will really set you apart within the interview steps. One thing I do, or I've done in you know, when I've been searching for jobs in the past, is I'll print out the job posting, and then I will have my resume next to me. And as I read each bullet, I take notes and say, what experience do I have with that bullet point item? And that's really helped me. And I keep that then handy if I'm asked for an interview, because then I can speak directly to work experiences that I've had in the past that I could apply in that new job. So that's really been a huge help for me. And, you know, doing homework on the organization and industry, look at also too, not only looking at their website, but also looking at LinkedIn profiles, looking at if they're on any other social sites such as Facebook or Instagram, or if it's a place that you can actually go to. So for example, if you're interviewing, and let's say hospitality, you know, or restaurants, you know, go to those restaurants, go to the hotels, go to, you know, if you can physically go to that place because it's open to the public in some regard, go spend time there, see what it's all about. Research the interviewers too. I think that this is important, and frankly, this is what LinkedIn's for. So look people up on LinkedIn, learn a little bit more about their background. You know, where did they work prior? Where did they go to school? You know, how long have they been at the organization? So don't be afraid to look people up. I know some people call it, oh, they're LinkedIn stalking, but hey, I'd rather go in prepared and knowing who I'm talking to than having no clue at all. So that's all the prep work that happens before the interview. And also too, don't be afraid to ask people what they know about that organization. Because especially if you work with service partners, and they often know best what it's like because maybe they have that organization as a client. Don't be afraid to ask that. Next, thinking about interview etiquette. So clothing, you know, what's their work environment? Are they a suit and tie type of place? Are they business casual? Are they more of a like jeans and casual organization? So I think understanding that is important. I'm still always a fan though of dressing up for an interview, whether that's a suit, you know, a nice pair of shirts, a nice pair of pants and shirts, you know, collared, and, you know, maybe a sweater over, something that demonstrates professionalism. I'd rather be overdressed than underdressed. And especially now with interviews that might be taking place over Zoom, please still continue to dress up. And that means please put on a pair of pants and not pajama bottoms. It is important that I think there's something to be said about getting up, dressing for the part that you want. So keep that in mind. You know, materials, you know, I think you know, if you have some kind of like padfolio, if you're going for an in-person interview, some type of padfolio is important to have. You know, bring a water bottle. I think that coming prepared and having items like that keeps you organized, keeps you hydrated. You might be talking for a while, so it's important to have those handy. Remember your manners, shaking hands. Well, now we can't really shake hands with people, so maybe it's the elbow bump, or the, thank you. Some people are doing like virtual, like I'm shaking your hand now. Remember to always have those manners. Please, thank you, saying yes instead of yeah. Things like that to keep in mind as you're interviewing. Questions also to anticipate and utilizing the STAR method in your responses. So thinking about what the job description or job posting requires, be prepared to have responses to those. And I'm a huge fan of the STAR method. If anybody's ever heard of the STAR method, maybe you've heard of this before. If you haven't, I've done this before when I've gone in interviews. I draw a star on a piece of paper and I keep that handy right next to my resume. So situation, task, action, result. So when you're giving an answer, a response to a question, because oftentimes questions are focused on previous behavior or future behavior, you want to describe what was the situation, what was the task that you were responsible for, what action did you take, and what was the result? Because that will answer that question, and more times than not, probably limit the amount of follow-ups that happen. You're describing the situation, so you're putting it in text for people, in context for people. You're demonstrating, you're showing what responsibility you took on in terms of the task. You're demonstrating the actions that you took to get to that result and what was the result. And even if the result isn't necessarily a favorable one, I think it's important to show that you did take action because of the task and because of the situation at hand. So I think that's a great way to respond to those past behavior questions as well as future-oriented questions. Also, come prepared with questions to ask the interviewers and thinking about the people that you're interviewing with. What functions do they have? Who are their team members? What questions do you have for them about their company, about their industry? Come with those list of questions, and hopefully they give you time to answer. I think now more than ever, it's important that you as candidates are interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you. And remember to say thank you, dropping an email, sending a thank you note in the mail. Please do this. It drives me crazy when people don't follow up, even after a phone screen. Thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing from you. Quick, to the point. So those are my tips on interviewing. Open it back up for questions from the team.
Yeah, well, there's actually just one, and it's not referencing the interviewing section. This is an overflow from the LinkedIn section.
Okay.
It says, my current and past jobs have pigeonholed me into jobs I am no longer interested. Most times when I turn on my LinkedIn profile, I only get interview meetup requests for jobs I would never consider. How do I customize my profile to ensure I'm not wasting someone else's time while not offending solicitors?
Good question. I would say, and I believe that there's a function now on LinkedIn where it says if you're open to job opening, if you're open, for looking for a new opportunity. I think being as specific as you can, either in the about section through your keywords. And I would also make sure that you respond to people who reach out to you, even if the position is not what you like, saying, thank you so much for considering me and letting me know about this position. I'm not interested in this role. However, if you have a role in HR that focuses on talent acquisition, that's what I'm interested in. Please keep me in mind. Thank you for your consideration. So I think you're responding to the person, you're letting them know that you're not interested in that type of role, but here's the type of role that you're looking for, and you're thanking them. So I think I would tailor my response that way.
Great, thank you. One more about LinkedIn. Is paying for premium worth it, or is the free version just as beneficial?
I think the free version is just as beneficial. I mean, if you want to make the investment, it doesn't hurt. I would just look at your budget, and I would also determine what features you're looking for are paid versus free, whether or not you can make that investment. And I believe that you can see that there's a comparison table within LinkedIn that you can search for that shows the differences.
Okay, great. That's it.
All right. Just a couple other quick pieces. I want to go back to networking because, as I mentioned before, it's all about who you know. I'm a firm believer that it's 2 degrees of separation in our, at least in the Cleveland area, and frankly, even perhaps in the U.S. So reminder that networking is still happening. It might not necessarily always be meeting up for coffee with people. It might be virtual Zooms where you have coffee together at home, or just even, maybe both of you are back in the workforce, but you're not getting together because you're not comfortable doing it yet. Networking is still happening. Please continue to get involved and network, especially when you're job searching. And remember too, that it is all about what you can do for other people. And because guess what happens? People pay it forward. They remember how you help them. So when it's your time to ask for help, more often than not, people will help. So remember to pay it forward. And finally, again, get involved, whether that's through LinkedIn, whether that's some of the groups that we mentioned before, whether that's volunteering for a cause that you care about. These are great, great ways to build not only your knowledge, skills, or abilities in a certain area, but also just to meet other people, because you never know where that next opportunity might come. Nonprofits, they need your help still, and especially with COVID. So get involved in whatever capacity you can. And remember this, believe in yourself even when no one else does. You are a professional, you have the capabilities. Anything you could possibly want to learn is on the internet for free or through sessions like this. Believe in yourself, have confidence, you can do it. I know that interviewing and resume writing and LinkedIn reviews aren't always the most fun, but if you believe in yourself, anything can happen. So here's my contact information. Feel free to shoot me an email or call or text anytime. I'm happy to help you with whatever you need. And if I don't know the answer, I'm certainly willing to connect you to people who do. And I really appreciate the time today. Again, all opinions are my own. And if you have any questions on anything we talked about today, or just even the job process in general, please reach out. Thanks for having me. Any other questions?
We have a couple more questions just for you before we say our goodbyes. We have one that is, I have 2 gaps in employment, 11 months and 5 months in length due to a personal health condition, which is now managed. How can I answer questions about my employment gaps honestly without risking discrimination?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think be willing to what you just said. It was a personal health condition that I had to take time off of the workforce from, and you leave it at that. I think if you want to list it on your resume, that's fine. You're being open and honest and transparent, and you're not putting specific medical information in there. I think that's okay. And I also think based on, 10, 12 years ago, with our, with the recession that happened, I think more and more employers are used to gaps and understand why they happen. And also too, I think now with medical, obviously everything going down with our pandemic, more of that will happen. So I think don't be afraid to list it, but I would keep the information very, very factual and not elaborate on any kind of medical condition.
Great. Okay, we've got a couple more.
Yeah.
How do you deal with ageism when you deal with a virtual interview? Any way to minimize this problem?
I would say, I don't know if you can, and here's why. So if it's a video, if it's a video call, I mean, I'm no longer in my 20s, and I think I probably reflect that in my appearance. So if you're talking from an appearance standpoint, I don't think there's anything that you can necessarily do. I think continue to show up as who you are and be professional, and, as we talked about, dress for the interview is important. I think if you're talking about it more so than from a, job interview perspective or, interviewing piece, I think it's important to showcase your work experience because you have a lot to offer. You have experience. That experience should be put to good use. And don't be afraid to reflect that. I know what you mean about ageism and I think unfortunately at some organizations that's very real through experiences that I've heard from. But I would encourage you to show up as you are and reflect who you are. And if that's an organization that discriminates in that way, that's not an organization you want to be a part of. So I'm happy to talk more specifics if you'd like to talk more in depth about that.
Okay, we've got one more. What are some ways we can get involved with a nonprofit during a pandemic?
Yeah, great question. I think there's lots of ways. I think one, figuring out what are you passionate about? So I love animals. I love dogs especially. So, and I also love giving back to the HR community. And I also love some of the other organizations that you heard about, like Cleveland State and Insur Optimist and Engage Cleveland. Those are organizations I'm passionate about. So it's once you identify what you're passionate about, reach out to that organization and say, hey, I'd love to volunteer. What are the opportunities that you have available right now? Maybe they're looking for somebody who's volunteer, for an hour a month or an hour a week. Maybe there's somebody who wants you to get involved in a committee on the board or a committee with an event or some other type of special fundraising activity that's happening. Maybe they want you to serve on the board because of your background, or maybe you have a skill that they're seeking and that they feel like they're lacking with their current board. So the other piece, so one, actively seek out what options there are. Two, if there's somebody who's on a board or a committee or volunteers with them, ask them to ask and let you know what those opportunities are and how you can get involved. So you can also message them on social media and through direct messaging, ask them what opportunities are there. So if you need help with that too, I'm happy to help connect.
Well, thank you, Lauren, so much just for being so generous with your expertise. This has certainly been a beneficial conversation. I mean, I echo the comments from a lot of the people who were attendees. We appreciate it, and going to put some of this to good use. It's good to hear from an alumna who's thriving and succeeding in their respective career, and then want to pay it forward like you were talking about earlier. We want to thank everyone who attended this morning. We hope it was beneficial. Believe it was. Please remember to check our website, csualumni.com, for any more of these future virtual opportunities to connect and engage and learn more. And thank you so much, Lauren. Is there anything else you want to add?
Thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed the conversation, and please don't hesitate to reach out. Like I said, I'm happy to help. And I know with a lot of things that we talked about today, there's some very specific questions. So I'm happy to talk with you about those. Email or call or text anytime. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, be well, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.